What do you get when ancient superstition collides with cold, calculated greed? When the fear of curses and the allure of magic are manipulated by someone who knows exactly how to play on the minds of the desperate. In 18th century England, that dangerous intersection gave rise to one of the most chilling figures in the annals of true crime, Mary Bateman. During this time, the world was shifting, science was emerging, reason was spreading, but in many corners of the country, old beliefs still clung tightly to daily life. A cough could be a curse. A misfortune could be witchcraft. People still whispered about omens and hexes, still paid for protection against unseen spirits. And it was in this tense space, where hope and fear mingled, that Mary made her stage. She offered predictions, spells, remedies, comfort, and all the while, she cloaked herself in an air of ancient wisdom, while quietly preparing for murder. Mary Bateman wasn't just seen as a fortune teller. She was revered, feared, and trusted as someone with access to the supernatural. She presented herself as a woman touched by forces beyond comprehension. But under that veil of mysticism lurked something much darker. A manipulative mind with a talent for deception, a thirst for control, and a plan that would leave death in her wake. This is not just a story of a poisoning. It's a tale of illusion and influence. Of how one woman turned fear into a weapon, and wielded it like a blade. This is the story of the Macclesfield Poisoning Case, and of Mary Bateman, the woman who became known as the Witch of the North. What unfolds when ancient superstition collides with cold, calculated greed? What happens when fear, raw, unfiltered fear, becomes a currency, and one woman learns to spend it with deadly precision? In the fog-laced alleys and candlelit parlors of 18th century England, where suspicion brewed stronger than tea and whispers of witchcraft never quite died, there emerged a figure as beguiling as she was dangerous. Her name was Mary Bateman, and her story is one that chills the spine and stirs the imagination, a story of cunning, of control, and of crimes cloaked in the shadows of the supernatural. The 1700s in England were a paradox. On one hand, the Age of Enlightenment was dawning, bringing science, rational thought, and skepticism into the intellectual mainstream. But for the common people, especially in the rural villages and poorer districts, old beliefs had not vanished. They had simply gone underground, hiding in plain sight. Superstitions weren't just quaint leftovers of a medieval past. They were powerful forces shaping daily life. A cow falling ill could be blamed on a neighbor's curse. A sudden death might be seen as the result of an evil eye. And when things went wrong, as they so often did in a hard, uncertain world, people turned not to doctors or priests, but to folk healers, charmers, and fortune tellers. This was the perfect storm in which Mary Bateman thrived. She didn't just sell remedies, she sold hope. She peddled protection against imagined forces. She wrapped her schemes in the soft velvet of mysticism, and spoke with the conviction of a prophetess. She cast herself as a seer of hidden truths, a bridge between the known world and the realms beyond. And those who sought her help did not question her. They believed. They trusted. They obeyed. But Mary wasn't driven by spirituality. Beneath her calm exterior and honeyed words lay a mind engineered for manipulation. She studied people with the precision of a predator. She sensed weakness, spotted desperation, and twisted both to her will. Her gifts weren't divine, they were psychological. And as she whispered of hexes and cures, she plotted. And when the time came, she delivered not salvation, but death. This isn't merely a tale of arsenic and deceit. It's a deeper story. Of human vulnerability, of belief weaponized, of fear turned into a tool of domination. Mary Bateman did not kill with rage or impulse. She killed with patience, with performance, with poison. And in doing so, she etched her name into the blood-stained ledger of British true crime as the Witch of the North. Mary Bateman's story begins, fittingly, in the rolling hills of Yorkshire, a place where folklore lingered like morning mist and tales of witches and wise women passed easily between generations. Born into modest circumstances in the late 1760s, Mary came from a family with little status and fewer prospects. But from an early age, it was clear, Mary was no ordinary child. She had a sharp mind, a sharper tongue, and a presence that made people pause. Some found her captivating, others, quietly unnerved. She had that intangible quality that made it hard to look away, and harder still to say no. As she grew into adulthood, Mary quickly recognized the power of performance. The way a well-timed whisper, a knowing glance, or a cryptic phrase could give her control. By her early 20s, she built a small empire, not of property or gold, but of influence. She branded herself as a fortune teller, a spiritual healer, a woman with access to otherworldly knowledge. In an age when medicine was primitive and religion didn't always comfort, Mary filled the void. People from all walks of life sought her out. They asked for predictions, for protection, for potions. And Mary always delivered, wrapped in ritual, mystery, and just enough danger to feel real. But behind the candlelit sessions and whispered incantations, Mary was playing a darker game. She wasn't simply predicting the future. She was shaping it, one poisoned teaspoon at a time. Each client was a potential pawn. Each illness a possible opportunity. Her tools weren't just herbs and spells. They included powders of a far deadlier kind. And then came Macclesfield. This market town, steeped in centuries of rural superstition, was fertile ground for someone like Mary. The people there were not just vulnerable, they were primed. Whispers of the devil, of curses, and of the evil eye were part of the cultural fabric. And into this world of quiet dread stepped Mary Bateman, mysterious, confident, and bearing the solutions to invisible problems. Among her most tragic victims were Rebecca and William Perigo, a couple ensnared by illness and fear. They were desperate, both physically and spiritually. William had fallen gravely ill with symptoms that defied explanation. Conventional medicine had failed. Desperation drove them to Mary, who claimed she was working not alone, but in concert with a spiritual authority, a woman she referred to only as Mrs. Blythe, a supposed medium who communicated with the unseen world. Through this phantom advisor, Mary began prescribing a series of remedies, powders, potions, strange rituals. She warned the Perigos that they were cursed, that dark forces had entwined themselves around their home, their health, their lives. But help was at hand, for a price. Unbeknownst to them, those remedies contained not the balm of healing, but the bite of arsenic. Slowly, methodically, Mary poisoned the couple. Not in one violent act, but in careful, repeated doses. She watched as their health waned, as their terror grew, as their trust in her deepened. She controlled not just their bodies, but their very reality. To Mary Bateman, the Perigos weren't people in need. They were marks, tragic figures in a story she was authoring with malice and meticulous care. In the quiet corners of Macclesfield, where folk clung to the streets like whispers of old sins, fear and folklore still ruled. The townsfolk, though touched by the progress of the Enlightenment, still looked to the sky for omens and to shadowy figures for protection. Superstition wasn't just belief, it was survival. And Mary Bateman understood this. She thrived in the cracks between progress and paranoia. To her, Macclesfield wasn't just a stop, it was a stage. And her next act would be the deadliest yet. Rebecca and William Perigo were the perfect marks. A humble couple facing an unexplained illness, they turned to Mary with a blend of desperation and reverence. Their fear made them vulnerable, their hope made them trusting. And Mary, always the performer, stepped into the role of their salvation with practiced ease. But she wasn't alone, at least, not according to her own tale. She spoke frequently of Mrs. Blythe, a mysterious spiritual medium who, she claimed, communicated directly with the spirit world. To the Perigos, this invisible ally seemed to grant Mary an even deeper connection to powers beyond the veil. Mary began offering magical remedies, strange powders, enchanted potions, rituals by candlelight. She explained the illness not in medical terms, but in supernatural language. The couple was cursed, hexed by unseen enemies, and only her arcane knowledge could protect them. The Perigos clung to this lifeline, swallowing her concoctions and following her instructions to the letter. But with each dose, Rebecca Perigo's condition worsened. She didn't die suddenly. Mary wouldn't allow that. No, Rebecca suffered. Her decline was slow, agonizing, and confusing. The pain came in waves. Her strength ebbed away. And Mary? She remained at her side, murmuring that the curse was fighting back, that more powders were needed. That trust and time would bring healing. But there was no healing. Because the powders Mary provided were laced with arsenic. When Rebecca finally died, it wasn't just the loss of a life, it was the shattering of an illusion. William Perigo, once completely under Mary's spell, began to see the cracks in her carefully curated facade. The grief of losing his wife gave way to suspicion. Why had the potions caused pain? Why had the letters from Mrs. Blythe always appeared in Mary's handwriting? Why did every encounter with Mary feel more like manipulation than ministry? Eventually, William did the unthinkable. He reported her to the authorities. The arrest of Mary Bateman sent shockwaves through the region. Not just because of the crime, but because of what was found. In her possession were bottles of poison, handwritten letters falsely attributed to Mrs. Blythe, and a menagerie of so-called magical objects, talismans, charms, and ritual items she had used to cement her mystical persona. But perhaps the most chilling revelation wasn't in what she owned, it was in what she had done. As investigators dug deeper, it became clear, Mary had fooled dozens. She had bewitched communities not with spells, but with psychological manipulation, emotional control, and the ancient currency of fear. She was not simply a conwoman. She was a predator, an emotional puppeteer, using grief, illness, and desperation as her strings. And she had wielded that power with terrifying precision. Was Mary Bateman a cold-blooded killer, who hid behind the veil of folklore, and exploited the weak? And if you're drawn to stories that sit at the crossroads of true crime, psychology, and history, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us reach more curious minds who love diving into the dark, strange, and forgotten corners of the past, just like you. Or was she a twisted creation of her time? A product of a world where superstition reigned and fear made monsters easy to follow? Let's talk about it in the comments. Was she a mastermind, or a mirror of her era? Mary Bateman met her end at the gallows in 1809, but her legacy didn't die with her. In fact, it was put on display, literally. Her skeleton was exhibited for over a century, a macabre museum piece, a chilling warning etched in bone. A symbol of what happens when manipulation festers into murder, and when fear is allowed to flourish unchecked. But her story leaves behind more than headlines and horror. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. How much power do fear and belief hold over our lives? What are we capable of when we feel helpless, or desperate, or deceived? And perhaps most haunting of all, would we have been any different, living in her time? Mary Bateman wasn't just a criminal of the 18th century. She was a reflection of a society that blurred the lines between healing and harm, between faith and fear. She was the consequence of ignorance, and the architect of her own twisted myth. So if this case left you thinking, if you felt the shadows of the past whispering through the details, then you're in the right place. Subscribe to the Crime Keepers for more haunting stories where history meets horror, where the line between fact and folklore is never quite clear. And don't forget to click the bell icon, so you never miss the moment when the past returns with a vengeance. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and remember, sometimes the most terrifying ghosts are the ones who once walked among us.